Stony Island Audio.
And now, it's time for the Dad Bod Rap Pod with your hosts, Damone Carter, David Ma, and Nate LeBlanc.
Three underground rap nerds walked into a bar. An argument ensued about who the GOATs are. The seed was a thought that would turn into a pod. Now fans worldwide say, not a bad job, the ad hoc cab squad who chronicles the vanguard of hip-hop at large. Rap taste slacked off, don't need to be mad, dog. Look no further, it's the Dad Bod Rap Pod.
Podcasting live from San Jose, California, it is the Dad Bod Rap Pod. Air horn, full squad today. Myself. It's been a while. Damone Carter, aka Dim One, here with y'all. I am joined, as I always am, by my brethren, Nate LeBlanc. What's happening, man?
Doing good. Good to see you guys. It seems so weird that we all hung out in person last week, and it feels like 10 years ago already. Right. So much has happened since then. I'm so over LA. No, I'm not. Dave, still managing to rock a Scully in 80-degree weather. How's it?
It's going okay. I'm losing the battle on the allergy front, but otherwise It's good to see you. Like Nate said, we were just together 1 week ago, but that seemed like a year ago, strangely. So,
yeah, that's old news.
Always good when we connect, though.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're happy to have a special guest with us for this roundtable segment. Want to bring on the program author who just dropped a new book about DJ Screw called DJ Screw: A Life in Slow Revolution. Welcome to the podcast, Lance Scott Walker. How's it going, man?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Who is joining us from a Whataburger parking lot in somewhere deep in the heart of Texas, where all my exes live.
I'm actually in the parking lot of Hype Waco, which is a clothing store here in Waco, Texas, which is where I just did an event. No Whataburger in sight, but I'm sure that it's not far.
No, it's somewhere. They're off in the distance. Thanks for making the time. So yeah, we're very interested. We're pretty literate here on this program. Nate is our the guy who reads most of all the books that come our way. We were able to get copies of your book. Can you talk about like what made you want to even do a book about DJ Screw, and why did you think you were the person to do it?
I wanted to do a book about DJ Screw because, well, there wasn't one. Started looking into one when I was working on the book Houston Rap, which I started in 2005. And I was working with the photographer Peter Best, and we were studying really all of Houston. You know, we were talking about the Screwed Up Clique, but we were also talking about the Ghetto Boys and Rap-A-Lot Records and Swisha House and South Park Coalition and all the different movements in Houston. But, you know, I got interested in the idea of a book on DJ Screw based on, you know, the stories that people were telling me about him and the picture of the person that they were painting. I mean, I got a picture of the artist for sure, you know, and I kind of had an idea of the artist anyway, because, you know, I'm from Galveston, Texas, but I lived in Houston, Texas all throughout this period from 92 to 06. So it's through that entire run where, you know, where Screw was making music and he was alive in Houston. You know, what really made me want to write the book was the stories people told about the person, not the artist. You know, the artist was one thing. The artist was obviously very, super influential and really important to the different movements in Houston, even if there weren't movements that he necessarily led, you know, stuff like Swisha House and, you know, Beltway 8 Records and, you know, all these kind of different movements that spawned off from him. But really, it was the stories about the person and people's relationships with that person and the love that they had for him that was just so palpable all these years after he died. You know, he'd been dead for 4 years whenever I started this project. And the way that people talked about him, they still very obviously carried a lot of love in their hearts for him. And it was very obvious that he had a lot of love for the people around him, and they still felt it.
Thank you for explaining that, man. You know, I was reading the beginning of the book, and maybe it was just the foreword. I'm not sure where it was, but you wrote that you're, and I quote, a white punk rocker from Galveston, Island.
Yeah.
So that just made me sort of wonder, what was your personal musical journey with Screw's music? Like how you discovered it, how it strikes you, all that.
Well, my relationship with hip hop goes back to middle school when I was in sixth grade in 1984 when, really all the hip hop movies started coming out, and, Fat Boys and Run DMC broke. You had Curtis Blow, you had UTFO, Roxanne Shante. That whole kind of movement was an early for me, and kind of the first music that, kids in my middle school kind of felt like belonged to them, because it was, it was such a now generation kind of music. Even though hip hop had been around for 10 years by then, that was when it was really breaking through and really reaching people. And hip hop through Africa Bambaataa led me to punk rock and heavy metal. And then those became, parallel loves of mine, through the years. I moved to Houston in 1992, which was when Ghetto Boys were breaking nationally, with Mind Playing Tricks. So that was really what was going on in Houston when I moved there. But over the next few years, you couldn't move around Houston without hearing DJ Screw. You couldn't move around Houston without hearing a car drive by and Screw's music pumping out of it. So it became this sort of atmospheric quality, of living in Houston, where, you heard the music everywhere, and it became part of your experience, just like, hearing, even more so than like hearing rock music or anything like that, hearing Screw music, hearing Tejano music. Those were things that you heard in cars all the time. So it's part of the tapestry of sound that you hear in Houston, and it fits. I think the reason that so many people connected with Screw's music in Houston was because, like, Houston's hot, it's slow, you got to drive everywhere, and this, Screw's music just is a perfect soundtrack for that. Not to mention the fact that he's talking about streets in Houston. He's talking about neighborhoods in Houston. The people on the tapes are rapping about their streets, their neighborhoods, their culture. And so, even being somebody who didn't grow up in that scene by any measure, it was still part of the culture of Houston. And I have a deep, deep love for Houston. And so, those are the things that, along with the story I mentioned earlier about just learning about the person, was what really led me on that journey.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And you decided to structure the book as an oral history, and each person who is quoted is credited under their name, and there are great explanations in the back of who people are. I was just reviewing those right before you popped onto the Zoom, and it's, these are, some of the people would be well known to people who really follow Screw's music. Other people are family members or members of the community who maybe names don't ring out in the streets. How did you decide on the oral history structure, and did you always know you wanted to approach it that way?
I did always know that I wanted to approach it that way, but I wasn't exactly sure how I was going to do it, because I've never seen a book structured like this before. And I've looked through, I own many, many biographies. I've looked through many, many more, and just different. It doesn't have to, obviously this is not restricted to a biography. There's plenty of other books that use oral history as their sort of storytelling. And my first two books are strict oral histories. But I also felt like the format has its limitations, because there's a lot that sort of goes unexplained, which, can add to the mythology, or it can be really pretentious, Right. So I wanted to avoid that. I didn't necessarily want to destroy all the mythology around DJ Screw, but I also didn't, want it to be so pretentious that you kind of really had to know what was going on to get a sense of the story. So I always knew I wanted to structure it as an oral history, but I wasn't exactly sure how I was going to do it.
Yeah. I've read a couple of those James Andrew Miller oral history books. I think there's one on ESPN and one on SNL. And the one thing I just wanted to interject, well, because sorry to stop your flow, is they tend to focus on institutions, not on people. So doing an oral history around a person kind of gives you this like Rashomon style view in, where you get varied opinions about what happened at the time, and then it's the reader's time to make a decision about what happened, essentially, right? It's different than doing it about a company.
Yeah. I always knew I wanted to do it I wanted to do some sort of, you know, hybrid take on it. And you know, I began talking to the University of Texas Press in 2015. That's when we first got in touch. And, you know, they were interested. They're like, yes, we want that, but you have to do a book proposal. You have to jump through all the hoops. And I knew that was going to take me years because I was still really building the library and just starting to shape the way that the manuscript. So I told them, you know, somewhere along the way, like, hey, this is going to be sort of a hybridized version of it. And, you know, they were kind of like, all right, I don't know. You know, I've never seen anything like that, you know, but, you know, I'm a graphic designer by trade, and I've typeset books before, and I've typeset, you know, countless, you know, projects over the years, you know, going back 25, 30 years. And so I thought about it a long time about, like, how can I solve this to where we don't have to like indent every time that somebody talks, or we don't have to italicize, you know, we don't have to italicize my parts, but we can really make it to where the voices are highlighted throughout the book, and let people tell their stories, you know, at length, and not just have, you know, a paragraph where I'm writing something and then I just slice one line from somebody in there to kind of reinforce what I'm talking about. It's like, no, I really want people to be able to tell their stories at length and kind of use their own natural storytelling flow, and to allow their personality to come out in the text, you know. And I felt like, and as I was going, it felt just more and more important to me to foreground those voices. I mean, not the least of which reasons being, I'm a white writer, you know. This is going to go through, no doubt, and I address this in the preface, like, this is going through the filter of a white punk rocker from Galveston Island. You can address it all you want in the preface, but you have to deal with it in the book. You have to make it happen in the book. And the best way I knew to make that happen was to dial myself back to where I'm really just guiding you through this. Of course, yeah, I'm the one doing the research. I'm the one doing the interviews. I'm the one putting together the chronology of his life and everything like that. But in the end, I want the real spice of the book, the real flavor of the book, the real heart of the book to be the voices of the people who knew him and who lived around him and who he loved.
That's awesome. That was such a great answer. You answered the question I was about to ask, which is great because I can see you've been on a book tour. So with that being said, do you feel like because you took this approach with the kind of hybrid oral history, do you think it provides you with, for lack of a better term, cover, in the sense that I think a lot of the consternation about some of the biographies that are coming out is always like, well, who is this guy to be writing this? And you've kind of centered yourself as an outsider, right? You're like, I'm coming into this space. Yeah. Do you think the format that you used kind of gives you some cover and some distance from being kind of assailed as such as an interloper, or somebody's trying to tell a story that's not theirs?
Well, you know, I'm still going to be assailed no matter what. And that's okay. It's understandable, you know, I 100% understand that. But I think, you know, that the answer is in the text, you know. I mean, you know, look at the interviews I did, and look at the trust that I very obviously had to build over years of working, you know, and you know, you don't just get these interviews by just calling somebody and saying, oh, I want to do an interview for a book. You know, what time can you talk?
Yeah.
It takes years to build trust. It takes years to build a rapport. It takes years to get to the point with certain people. With other people, they'll talk to you right away. I've been waiting to tell this story. Thank you for calling me. Yeah. And other times, you know, there's some hesitation. And it might be the hesitation of, I don't trust the media, or I don't know, you know, a book is kind of a far off idea to me. I don't really, what are you trying to do? Or, you know, who are you? Okay, well, let me tell you who I am. Give me a few minutes. Let me kind of explain what I'm doing. And you guys know this, you know, like, you know, when you're interviewing somebody, you're telling them everything they need to know about you based on the way that you process the world, based on the questions that you're asking them, you know, like the way that you're phrasing things, the way that you ask about people, the way that you talk about other people, what you're telling as an interviewer, you tell the interviewee everything they need to know about you based on the way that you interact with them. And that either makes them comfortable or it makes them uncomfortable. If it makes them uncomfortable, you're not getting another interview, or you're not getting them to open up, and you're not getting those answers. And, the only thing that you can ever do is to number one, do your research. And number two, be passionate about what you're doing, so that when you get knocked down in the sense that you don't get the interview that you want, that you get right back up, because you've fallen in love with what you're doing, and you want to bring it to the finish line. I don't know if that 100% answers the question, but
no, I definitely, thank you. That definitely helps kind of articulate that. Do you feel like have you received any backlash? I know the book is just getting out there, but have you received any backlash thus far about it?
Before it came out, before anybody saw it.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I think the criticism was just on its face. Okay, this is a white guy writing this book. Mm-hmm. What's up with that? But and I've seen it, and I didn't respond to it because I understand it. And I had to feel like I felt like I had to do the work. I had to work much harder, I feel like, to make that work. Mm-hmm. And to respond to your question earlier, I think that foregrounding those voices, at least for me, I felt like that's the best, that's my best approach, is to bring those voices to the front and to transcribe it and to present it in a manner where they see themselves when they read themselves, and like when you read yourself, does this sound like you? Does this sound, did I get the vernacular right? Did I get your pauses right? Did I get your emphasis, your when you're emphasizing something, does this sound like you? Is this your timing? Is this, that sort of thing? It's super, super important. And, it can't be rushed. You really have to take your time with that, and you really have to get to know somebody and get that feeling for them to make sure that you're seeing them on the page, and more importantly, that they see themselves on the page. I've said a lot of times in interviews, like, this book is for the people around Screw. This is for the people who are interviewed in the book. This book is for them. If it doesn't work for them, it doesn't work. And if it works for them, everybody else will figure it out. Like, it will if I make it to where it works and it's true for the people who were close to the situation, even if they can look at it and go, okay, there's a lot of stuff that's not in here. Of course, it's one book, and you can't get anybody's life into one book. You're never going to fit all of that in there. So, of course there's stuff missing, but hopefully I got everything right that I did include. And one way to do that is to have those stories told by the people who knew him, who were there.
Right on. Thank you for that. I'm glad you touched on the relationship building aspect of doing interviews. And certainly the book has extensive interviews, and, interviews from childhood friends and tastemakers who championed his work and all that. But I was wondering, were there an interview or two that changed your perception or outlook about Screw, the person?
Not changed it as far as, a wild left turn or anything like that. Sure. Reinforcing it, all the time. And especially getting to talk to, like, his long-term girlfriend, Nikki. I got a couple of interviews with her. She doesn't do interviews. I mean, that's someone it was not easy to get an interview with her. I got an interview with her sort of by chance on the phone in 2015. And then I had somebody arrange a meeting where we met for dinner, and, and eventually, really right at kind of the 11th hour before I was turning in a final manuscript. Anybody who's worked on a manuscript knows there's a final, and then there's final 2 and final 3 and whatever, but there was a point where I was about to turn something in, and I texted her, and she's like, okay, call me in 30 minutes. And then I got to talk to her for like 2 hours. So, those were always amazing conversations with his sister, conversations with his brother, and with his nieces and nephew. And, because you especially if you're working on a biography of somebody, you get a picture in your head of the parts of their life and kind of how their lives fit together, but you're very much aware of the missing parts. And to have any interview that like gives you a little bit of insight into that is just, I mean, it feels like such an achievement inside of the whole long process. My wife always would see me come out of the studio and I'm yes, like the Astros just won the World Series or something. She's like, what happened? I was like, I just talked to stick one, and get really excited about stuff because, like I said, you're passionate about it, and then
you're preaching to the choir here. Like, we all just did that a couple weeks ago. We're like running around our apartments, like, yes, that went so well. I can't believe it.
Our partners have no idea what the hell we're talking about.
Eye rolls.
Yeah, exactly. So it gives you, each time you get one of those, the story that's inside of you kind of fills up in its own way. And it just moves the football so much further down the field each time.
Very well said. Thank you. One thing I wanted to ask you from the second that I cracked this open and saw the way you structured it is, did you want to, I'm going to give you an opportunity to, and then I kind of want to hear, did you ever think about adding this into, do you have a thought process, or did you want to write an essay or a pontification about what Screw's music means? It's such a biography. What does it mean to double music? What does it mean to slow music? Do you have thoughts on that you want to express, or do you feel like other people kind of said it in the book? Do you get what I'm asking?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I do feel like other people expressed it. I hope so. I hope that, when somebody finishes the book, that they get that sense from everyone else. But that's also why I included, there's no forward in this book. There's just a preface, but there is a, what's it called? Epigram. You guys read enough books? Help me out. Epigram, right?
That sounds right to me.
The DJ Screw quote in the very beginning, from a Bilal Allah interview from 1995, Rap Pages, where he sort of explains it, and he's saying, I'm making my music for everybody so everybody can feel it. I might run something back because what they're saying is important. And, the whole process of him slowing something down, in a lot of ways is inspired by, him wanting to hear what people were saying. So, but I mean, I could write 10 essays on what Screw's music means to me.
Yeah.
But that's, again, that kind of goes back to whoa, rein yourself in, dude. Dial it back a little bit. This book, I mean, if you finish the book, you know that in the 10th chapter, I switched the first person, so that's bad enough, right? So, and I kind of go off on this sort of, let me kind of get really descriptive with you here for a second before I give you the personal story of when I saw Screw, but I could have done a lot of that, but I really hope that through the process of what the music meant to the people around it, who are around it the most, I hope that the readers get that sense from them.
Mm-hmm.
As someone who's literally unable to write something that's not essentially about myself, I commend you for sticking to the plan and at least waiting until you got pretty far into it before switching tenses. But I mean, it's a big accomplishment. The people in our world are very excited about it. I think he was a mystery to many, and that this helps enlighten people about who he was for real, who he really was, not the mythology of it, but the person. And I think it's really important. So thank you for talking to us, and thanks for putting this together. And I cannot imagine how much work that was to chase all those people down and transcribe every pause correctly. You have our utmost respect.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
Absolutely. Before we let you go, I have to ask this question. It's a question that I posed to Fat Tony, another Houstonian, and big Screw fan. I'm not saying I'm a skeptic. I don't think I got it yet in terms of the sound of Chopped and Screwed. Can you give me, what's the track I need to go listen to? And if I don't get that, then I can just, it's not gonna happen for me. What is the track that you would that would encapsulate.
Okay. All right. Okay, I got you. Listen to DJ Screw's mix of Street Military's Shit Get Wild in the City.
Okay.
Yeah. The Street Military was a local group from Houston. They were they're from several different neighborhoods. They're not, most groups in Houston are sort of centered around one neighborhood. Ghetto Boys are an exception because Ghetto Boys are kind of from all over town, and Street Military was the same way. And really super hard hitting group, great rappers, great producer. Klondike Cat, if you're familiar with that name from the South Park Coalition, would sing with them. And it's just a fantastic group. And his mix of that song just blows my mind because of all these new rhythms that he finds within the texture of the song, and brings out a song that I already thought hit plenty hard on its own. And, has, I think, one of my favorite lines ever uttered in any Houston rap song. And he winds that line back and, gives it another run. But that's a really good one. It's really distorted and it's really blasted out and everything like that. But it's also, one of the things that Screw was so good at was just, creating like absolute chaos sometimes. And sometimes that would be with him chopping something up and like creating these new rhythms and these new textures in the song. And other times it would be about him passing that mic around the room, and the people who took that mic and who were freestyling, sometimes just kind of more emceeing and hosting and talking over stuff. And you could hear other voices in the background and people laughing. And like, it's just such a beautiful sense of community, for one, of Screw bringing people in, and also Screw going like, express yourselves, like whatever you're going to do, go ahead and do it. You're safe with me. Do it in this room, express yourself, and then go out into the world and express yourself, and ride on my back, ride on my wings, and go out into the world and take what you're doing and do something with it.
That's awesome. Hey, Lance, appreciate you coming on the program. Everybody go out and cop DJ Screw, A Life in Slow Revolution, man. Thanks for coming on the pod.
Thanks so much for having me, y'all.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
Yeah, super cool. Want to thank Lance for stopping by. Is this our second person that's talked to us from a parking lot? I remember Rob Sonic.
Rob Sonic definitely did. Rob Sonic, of course, called in from a Sonic, not a
not Whataburger. Yeah, appreciate Lance making the time.
I feel like there's been a couple car ones. Who called from a car? I don't remember who was on the interview. Chez Noir.
Oh, is that right?
I remember.
And it was I think summer in Buffalo, and it was hot. Like,
okay.
I think Tajay early on called from a car.
Oh, Tajay did.
Tajay was coming back from Joshua Tree.
Yeah.
He was literally in a car talking to us. So those really cool for him to make the time for us like that. Super knowledgeable about the life and legacy of Screw, and so many interesting things to say about it. And we're just going to keep this whole writer vibe going. We've got another interview coming up, but Nate, I wanted to make a little space here for you to kind of talk about some of the winds that are swirling around our next guests and related to their latest work.
Yeah, so we have Paul Cantor on today. He is, a longtime music journalist, someone who's respected in the field. As you're about to hear, he has a background in music production, and he's a big music head. And he wrote a book called Most Dope: The Extraordinary Life of Mac Miller. And when it was kind of announced, like the Mac Miller stan community, if you will, kind of turned on him, and it exposed this kind of dark underside of online music fandom that people know is lurking in the distance. But essentially what it brings up is the societal question of who is allowed to write about whom. And like, do we really think as a society that only authorized books should be published? To me, that's an absurd notion. Like, as a kind of very low level journalist, I just cannot get behind that train of thought at all. Anyone can write about anything they want at any time. It's like, you're not going to get all First Amendment here, but like, you don't need someone's family's permission to write about them. People are going nuts. Like, people who I don't think actually think this or seem to be joining kind of online dog piles about this. And frankly, I find it disturbing. And as we're going to hear, you're fucking with people's lives here.
Like their actual lives. Dave, I know you as a writer have thought about doing some biographical stuff.
Yeah.
Does this whole conversation around who has permission to tell a particular story and kind of the weird toxic fan culture, do you think about that as a writer and thinking about, wanting to maybe write about somebody but potentially being put off?
Certainly. I mean, to Nate's point, I mean, I think it's an absurd notion. When I was toying with the idea of writing a book on Dilla, thankfully I didn't, because Charnis's is like top notch forever. But
yours is going to be great, Dave. I just want to put that out.
Well, mine was going to be more of an oral history, but I was starting to seek out permission from the Dilla estate. So on one hand, you do want the backing of the family, you do want their blessings, but on the other hand, you can write whatever the fuck you want to write, and I think a lot of the toxic fandom just comes from people thinking and wanting it to be just so precious, and it's like they don't even know the writer. Like a Kathy Andoli is going to treat a story about Aaliyah with the utmost respect, with all the complexity that it needs, and so for people to dogpile on Paul Cantor, it's like, well, you're not familiar with him. You're just immediately, this is a knee-jerk reaction to
media, right? I think
exactly.
Lance talked about that, is like this reflexive distrust of media in general, and there's reasons, right? But I think when people hear unauthorized biography, they conflate it with being like a hit piece or something that's going to be like salacious, and there are those type of things, but that's not every book, right?
But those serve a purpose. I don't want to remember when we did our Too Short episode and everyone was talking about Nancy Reagan's like insane head game? That came from an unauthorized biography that Kitty Kelly wrote, and she was famous for doing those kind of like gossipy, salacious pieces. Did it happen? Did it not? I don't know. It made it,
but I'm better for the story. Yes,
but I am. Like, you're allowed to like. I don't know. I don't think we want to live in this world where every biography is sanitized.
Okay, well, I agree with that. I do want to add that there is an element of we need to tell our own stories. So, which is ultimately an element of race, right? So, so it's a white author talking about Black culture. If it's some of the articles that I've written, it's been like, I want to tell the story. I want to tell our story. So with that sort of mind state, I get, but it comes as a knee-jerk reaction to, you don't know who this writer is, and that's probably the perfect writer to tell that story. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think folks are kind of like, it's the dilemma caused by the show Winning Time, which says, how much liberties can somebody take with
a real person who's alive's life?
Who's still alive, and it kind of it leans into this idea of like, what are the boundaries for a writer? I think Lance, I really respect him bringing up the fact that he was a white writer coming into the space and how it informed his approach, which I think is very self-aware and very good. Unlike the white woman who wrote Trap Feminism, it got pulled off the shelves because
that did not end well for her.
No, it really didn't. But it does speak to this thing of like, who is allowed to tell a story. The backlash, though, that I've seen around the Mac Miller book, the Aaliyah book, and then also this, it was just announced that Skiz Fernando, who's been on our program, is going to be doing a Dune biography. I think the reflexive backlash there is aren't these notions of race as much as just like, who are you to write this book about somebody who, Dave, I think you used the perfect term, that you hold precious. And I think we've turned as fans, because I don't know, I'm not going to postulate why, but as fans, I think we have turned into, it's kind of like sports where there's like Steph Curry guys and there's LeBron guys. And if you're a Steph Curry guy, nobody can tell you anything negative or realistic about him. And it's just kind of, it's a shitty place to be, but it's definitely
the lowest form of discourse. It's dishonest and it's stupid. And like, we have to get better as a society. And like, it's not really about society per se. It's like kind of about Twitter, isn't it? Like,
Twitter is where it congeals. Yeah,
for sure. It's toxic fandom for sure.
And that's kind of the holding space for all of it. And unfortunately, it was
and I don't
probably
want to
always
just write
there.
about LP and Eminem, so we're gonna have to figure this out. You know what I mean?
And you know, typically books that come out that are official and agreed upon by the state, those suck.
No, I can tell you firsthand. I read Gil Scott-Heron's authorized biography, which has a jacket note from Eminem. Ouch. It's not good. It is not good. I can't recommend. Knowing what I know about
some stories about some 4 a.m. drug deals in a Gil Scott-Heron book.
Please.
Eminem's on the moon.
Yeah. That's
what amazing. Is he, a buffoon?
Yeah.
Too soon.
So good. So good. So
anyway, we don't usually like take on the big topics of the day or whatever, but we really did want to talk to Paul about his book, and the booking god Dave got Lance to kind of show up in our Zoom from his car, which was an amazing synchronicity. And his book is really well done and a very interesting way to avoid subjects of this, not to avoid them, but to take them head on, and to deal with them in the text of the book. And and if anyone can send me a link to like Paul Cantor's production discography, I couldn't figure out what name he went under or where all this music is, but I'm very curious about these tracks that he did. But anyway,
Nate is deputizing the Dad Bod Nation to do this research. Yeah, so let's get into it. This is our conversation with writer Paul Cantor, Dad Bod Rap. Dad Bod, Rap Pod. Every week we talk to people who are moving and shaping hip hop culture. This week is no different. Joining us in Zoom, we have writer Paul Cantor. How's it going, man?
Fucking amazing now that I'm talking to you guys.
That is the effect that we typically have on people. No, not really. Thanks for joining us today. We definitely want to talk about your book, Most Dope, about the life of Mac Miller. But before we do that, I was reading your bio and it says that you started as a musician. So you talk to us a little bit about that, and like, how did you make this transition from musician to music entertainment journalist?
Well, shit. How much time do I have?
Some.
Let it roll.
All right. Well, yeah. I mean, you know, I did start my career as a music producer. You know, as a lot of people did, I think. You know, I honestly, not a lot of people know this, but I started out really trying to rap, and did that in my teens, and I was like kind of you know, known in my high school for that, you know, battling and stuff like that.
What was your rap name?
Oh, I can't even get into it because motherfuckers are going to try to get me canceled out here. So I'm just going to keep that on the low. But it's like that's the risk you take when you start talking about your actual past. People just gonna start digging up your yearbook and all types of things.
Yeah, this is really Oppo research, but I will let you finish your story.
But yeah, I never really you know, I never really pursued rapping too seriously. I didn't really have a lot of, you know, aspirations to be like a person. I just don't like being looked at, like in general. I always liked being behind the scenes. So I'm from Staten Island, and I was a big Wu-Tang fan, and I always just wanted to be like the RZA of something, you know, and be kind of talked about the way like people talked about the RZA, you know. So I mean, actually, if a funny rap story, probably the last time I like really rapped was I rapped for Capadonna in the Staten Island Mall. I like ran up on him. I was like still in high school, and I was like, "Yo, let me spit some bars for you." And I had to be like 16 or something like that. And yeah, I mean, he was very complimentary, and yeah, then I got into producing when I was 18, started buying like real equipment. Always made beats on like a little 4-track and DJ equipment, which I had gotten when I was about 12 or 13. And even before that, I like really digging into crates in my memory now. Like I would bring like beats and things to like show and tell when I was in like 3rd and 4th grade. So my history, like as a creator of music, goes back to like as early as I could possibly do it. And then when I was in college, around 18, 19, I got more serious about producing. Had a small recording studio in Staten Island that was pretty popping at the time, and worked with a lot of different people locally, and pretty much anybody who was anybody at that time. That was like when mixtapes were big in New York. So we would have a lot of people that were big on mixtapes recording in our studio. I actually was just remembering like 2 days ago, like I produced like for a rapper. He used to do a promo for Hot 97 that used to play like all the time, and I was just like, that's such an odd thing to have been involved with, like like I never talk about it, but like that used to play for like a year or 2 years every day, and like nobody even knows I did it. So yeah, I was pretty serious into the producing, and kind of still am, but I was much more on that path until my late 20s or so. And then in my early 30s, I got a little bit more inspired to get serious about writing. When I actually wrote something around the time that it was, I think, a 10-year anniversary from my mother passing away. My mother passed away in 2003. So I think it was in 2013. I just wrote something, my family was gathering for her, just at the cemetery. And I just wrote like a little personal remembrance type thing. And everybody was really moved by that. That was kind of like the first time I'd really written something like fairly personal. I was always kind of embarrassed about writing. I don't know why. I guess, nobody was around me that, looked at writing in like a really important way. And I don't know that I'd ever really written anything anybody was like really moved by. And that kind of like changed things for me. I started feeling like, you have like kind of a talent for this. Maybe you should kind of try to take it a little more seriously than you're currently taking it. So that's how I got, a little more serious about writing. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you for explaining that. So, Paul, you ended up writing for the New York Times, Rolling Stone. And before we dive into the Mac Miller book, I was going through your work, and I came upon a super old Kendrick interview that you did. And I just want to, get your opinion on Kendrick and sort of the backstory on how that happened, how that unfolded, and sort of where you see Kendrick going, given that you had an early eye on him.
Yeah, kind of crazy how his career panned out. I used to like text with him and everything, which is so odd, right? To just even remember that you would like text with like Kendrick Lamar, like just such a bizarre person. I don't know, that's one where I could actually acknowledge that I don't think I was really on the money with that. I didn't really see it happening for Kendrick. I was a person who felt that what he was doing was a little too, cerebral and a little too eccentric to be popular. At that time, rap was like a lot of the more, I don't want to say, for lack of a better term, almost like blog centric rap, it really wasn't crossing over into anything, right? It wasn't like reaching a large audience, right? It was kind of like, you know, I would almost put him in like a category with like, say, Slaughterhouse or something like that. You know, I mean, he was like touring with like Tech Nine, I think, when I did that piece, you know, and yeah, I just thought like that was going to be his career. You know, he was going to be a guy who like rapped really fast and stuff. And people were like, oh, this guy's like super lyrical. And it would be like a lot of, you know, great cultural criticism about him. But I didn't know that he would, you know, really ascend to the heights that he has. But also that was because so much of the culture around Kendrick and around that type of music became much more popular and much more centered, which was a positive thing, right? But that started happening around 2012, 2013, 2014, partially because of the issues that, you know, were becoming central to the conversation, right? You had, you know, Michael Brown being, you know, killed. You know, you had this situation in Staten Island with Eric Garner. So a lot of what Kendrick was doing, you know, was connecting with the moment that he was in. I want to say it's like the song High Power. I think it might be in that video, right? There's like a riot. It's like so much ahead. It was so ahead of its time. You know what I'm saying? And High Power is on, that's on Section 80, if I'm not sure, if I'm correct. You know, so yeah, I don't know. I just didn't know how that would like really, you know, if that would. I'm not sure. You know, you never know. I didn't think Eminem was gonna be a star. You know what I mean? Like when I was a kid. So you know, sometimes you guess him right, sometimes you guess him wrong. I liked Kendrick. I thought it was dope. You know what I mean? But like, you know, as a writer, right? At least 50% of it is your personal opinion, and then 50% of it is like you're kind of speaking for or trying to kind of speak for the audience a little bit, right? You have to kind of reflect who you're writing something for. So I didn't know with that one, but I mean, I'm glad it did work out for him, you know. And I mean, is he retired now? Is the question, right? I mean, what's going on? 5 years? It's nuts.
Yeah,
right.
Appreciate that perspective a lot, actually. I wanted to ask you, has there been a moment in your journalistic career where you had crazy access to something where you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm backstage at this show, or I'm at this after party with this table of people that I never thought I'd be able to be around? Like, does something stick out to you in your long career where you're like, holy shit, I got to do that. That was amazing.
Yeah, totally. By the way, that's an amazing question. Yeah, really early on in my career, not necessarily. I was already writing. I'd only written, I think, 1 or 2 pieces. It was the summer my career started. So I was 22. I just graduated college. I think I had maybe one piece in XXL. I reviewed a Master Ace album, A Long Hot Summer, which was a great album. And I was in a record shop called Sound Library in the Lower East Side. And I think, you know, if people listening to this are like big record people, you know what I mean? They would kind of know that place. And I don't think it's there anymore, but, you know, it was pretty legendary at the time. And I'm sitting there. I actually got put onto that place by the producer, Ski Beats, you know, did like a bunch of joints on Reasonable Doubt. Ski used to come to my house. I was managed at that time as a producer by Ski's old manager and business partner. So Ski took me to Sound Library and put me on it. You know, he would get all the cool records, right? Because they would hold all the cool stuff for him, right? And then I came back like a dweeb, like a week later, like, oh, Ski brought me here, and they were like, oh, go fuck yourself, go, you know, pay for the $20 basic ass records. But I'm sitting there. And who comes in? Andre 3000. right? And he sits down next to me because they used to have listening stations there. I had about 10 records with me. Andre sits down with, no joke, like 400 records, right? And every record in Sound Library was like, $25, right? And I was just like, poor 22-year-old. And me and Andre are sitting there for like an hour listening to records, just kind of looking at each other. And he's like, what do you got? I'm showing him the covers and shit like that. And so mind you, he winds up buying all these records, right? He buys all these records. He walks out, right? He's wearing, I forget exactly what he was wearing, like kind of like a denim outfit, right? I want to say there was a BET Awards or something that weekend or that night. Then he pops up on the BET Awards, literally wearing the same thing, right? Like he went straight from that, from the Sound Library to the BET Awards in LA, right? And then this story is getting somewhere, right? I used to have Jay-Z's email address. So I remember vaguely like me and Jay-Z were like exchanging, or I believe it was Jay-Z, right? He was like, Sean Carter at, whatever the sidekick email was at that time. And I remember like us exchanging emails, and this was all happening like around the same time. So I had like one day, I walk in this thing with Ski. I remember actually the time to Ski, I went there with him. I was actually emailing Jay-Z for Ski, who was trying to get in touch with him.
That's great.
So that was my young moment where I was like, what is happening right now? And then I only remember this so well because a friend of mine who's about my age recently called me and was like, remember you used to email with Jay-Z? I was like, yeah, I kind of do. Yeah, that's pretty crazy. But yeah, I've had a lot of moments like that. But every moment, man, I'm just like, yeah, J. Cole came to my house, I came back from playing basketball. Was hooping, like it was the afternoon. I was living in Manhattan. This was like in like 2016. We were like, oh, let's get together, on text or whatever. He's like, all right, I'll come to your house, come to your apartment. I walk back from playing ball. I go in the shower, right, and I like the doorman calls upstairs. I come out the shower. And he's like, oh, we have Jermaine is downstairs. I'm like, all right, send him up. I answer the door in a bathrobe, right? I'm like, hold on one second, right? He comes in, I go get dressed, and I'm like, this dude literally rode his bike to my apartment, and just was like, hey, I'm here to see Paul, like, and then yeah, yeah. So that's life.
Man,
a lot of stuff like that. Yeah.
What a life it is. Kind of related to that, I'm wondering, what's your approach when you're going to sit down with a J. Cole or an artist that is a big time artist, but you want to sit down and get them comfortable and somehow get a story out of them? Do you have a particular approach to that, or do you just kind of like kick it all day? Walk us through how that happens when you're talking to someone of that ilk.
It always varies. I know it's like a little bit of a cliche at this point. I am very on some like, the Bruce Lee thing, like be water, again, I acknowledge that is a cliche. But that's kind of, how you have to be, right? You just have to kind of conform to whatever the situation is. Generally, I'm a fairly relaxed person and I feel like journalists tend to be fairly type A. I'm like not really type A. I can't remember anything, I'm kind of, sometimes I'll be doing this shit and have to remind myself I'm like actually supposed to be doing something. Like I can never remember that, like, too many details unless I'm like, I know, like, oh, I got to be working, like, then I'll like really be on, but for the most part, it isn't until like afterward that I'll kind of like start putting the pieces together. But as I've gotten older, that process has changed a lot. One thing I tend to do now is like, which I know they don't really advise that much when you go to like journalism school and stuff, but I like write a lot from memory now, as opposed to, always recording everything. Like I'll just kind of remember like what a person said. Usually people say their most interesting things when they're not, supposed to be talking.
Yeah.
Right? Like you kind of, I think I did something on Rick Ross a couple of years ago, and it was like an interesting thing. I was like just doing some fly on the wall shit with him, and he said something about like he asked a question like he didn't know what like a mojito was or something, and I just like out of all the shit that he said that day, that was like the most interesting thing to me, right? But he didn't really know I was like listening to that. And he was like, "What's a mojito?" And I was just like,
"Are you even from Miami? Like,
yeah,
what are we doing?"
Just like, it was just odd because he's like, he talks about all these like he's just such a dropper of objects and things. And I was just like, I think it was mojito. I don't remember off the top of my head. I'm pretty sure it was though. And he was just like, "What is a mojito?" It's just be like random shit like that where a person like. You like go to a restaurant, and like people just don't know what like something super basic is. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of like how I used to be, like if I walked in, like I didn't know anything about like sushi or something, and I would walk in and be like, not know anything. It'd be like, what is a roll? You know what I mean? Like, how come they sometimes give it to you in like a little cone? Like, what the fuck is going on here? Like I wouldn't know anything how this stuff works. And that was kind of, it reminded me of that, but he's like 50, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
And
mad rich, but have you ever had an interview go left? You don't have to say rapper's name, but have you ever
totally. I mean, I had I had an issue like many years ago with Foxy Brown, where her and I got into like a little thing in the middle of the interview. She basically like had double scheduled herself. And I remember her, well, for one thing, she was, I mean, I don't want to like really, whatever, fuck it. I mean, she definitely like revealed something about herself, and I know this about artists, because from running a recording studio, right? I used to have a lot of artists. They would do interviews. They would tell people to come interview them at the studio, right? But when we were in the studio, they would be a lot different than they would be when they, kind of just stepped out into like a little lounge area, so to speak. The studio was in a house, so sometimes they would go upstairs. But like the conversation between the engineer and me and them would be like way different, than they would talk to the journalist, and they would kind of charm them, right? So this thing with Foxy, I remember this girl came, she's actually a journalist, Laura Checkaway. She makes documentaries and stuff now. She co-wrote Prodigy's book. So that's her, one really cool thing she did. But I remember the doorbell rang at Foxy's, wherever she was staying. Foxy had like a Maybach parked outside, right? And it was like some crazy car. This was like when a Maybach was like, it was like, I don't know, it was a different time. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like Maybach's really kind of average now. Not that I have one or anything, but, and so Laura rings the bell. And she opens the door and she says, "Oh shit, Laura's here. I'm double booked," right? She says, "Hold on one second," closes the door. And she looks at her like assistant across the way. And she literally says, she mouths, "Watch this, BITCH," right? And then opens the door, right? And then, Laura comes in and like, they're kind of making small talk, and Laura's like, what the hell? Why is there another journalist here? And then, I don't know, me and Foxy we wound up arguing over something, basically like she said that she was retiring, and then like kind of wanted to backtrack, and like, I don't know, she just got really pissed off, and she told me, you're never going to work again. She literally said that. She said, you're never going to work again. At this point, I'd been hanging out with her for like 3-4 hours. And like, she wanted to do this, like, I think if I remember correctly, she wanted to do the whole interview again. And I was like, what the fuck? We've been here for like 4 hours. Like, I got to get the fuck out of here. It's like midnight, and she wound up like kicking me out. And I just like left, and I was like, yeah, whatever, and then her guy comes, I get outside the hotel she was staying in, like, it might have been a Trump hotel back then, right? and he comes out downstairs, and he says, look, whatever you do, man, like, I'm begging you, please just don't run that interview, right? Please, whatever you do, don't run that interview. She's got a lot of problems. She doesn't know what she's doing, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay. And then he says, look, man, if you need anything, this is what sealed the shit for me. He says, look, man, if you need anything, I rent cars, and this is my rental. And I was like, okay, got it. And I was like, oh man, this is like such a show going on here, Wow. And yeah, I was pretty young then. I was like, 25 or so, and I was like, yeah, this is the entertainment business in a nutshell. Another time I almost got into a fight with Damon Dash, and yeah, we almost got into it. He got up, and I wrote about that in a piece for him on him for Vice, about us almost getting into a fight. And yeah, I mean, a couple of times, but I'm kind of good at, like, keeping things sort of civil. It never come from me. I never have issues with anybody. Like, I'm like a totally non-aggressive person. Like, if I never got into a fight again, I would be, gracious.
Great. Thank you, man. Thank you. Wonderful stories. We need to transition to the Mac Miller book, Most Dope, Extraordinary Life of Mac Miller. And, I know a lot of research went into it. You interviewed his friends and confidants. And I just want to know a little bit about your approach and the process, and sort of also how you dealt with the initial backlash of it being unauthorized, and how authors in general have to deal with stands, receiving things negatively when it's unauthorized.
Yeah, I mean, well, which part of that would you like me to address?
Tee off, man, wherever is fine.
Yeah, I mean, well, before I even started the book, right, I went to a bunch of people that were close to him, and some who were, I mean, about as close as you could possibly get. And I said, if I was to do this, like, what would this look like? Is this a thing you would support? Is it the right idea? Is it too early? Is it too, because I'd never done anything like that before, and, I remember one of them very specifically being like, no, if somebody was to do this, you would be the right guy for it, and, like, here, just kind of do your thing. If you want to do it, there's a little bit of a process you have to go through, but this is, told me what the process was. And then I kind of started going through that, and multiple people were supportive at first. A lot of his close friends and, just people in his inner circle. And I interviewed them kind of without any problems. Most of them said yes to me. It might have been like one or two people that, had their reasons or whatever. But for the most part, like, it wasn't difficult to get people to talk, because they kind of wanted to, they were like, yeah, this is dope. A lot of them knew who I was. Some didn't, you know what I'm saying? Like, maybe some of the friends who weren't like quote unquote industry savvy, weren't like dialed into like rap media and blah, 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 but by and large, like, it was it was a little bit of an exercise in just how to do one of these things, because I'd never done it before. And I wanted to be really careful, not necessarily out of like any, thing where I felt like I was doing something wrong, but more so because he was a person. And, when you do journalism, just, you got to be, I mean, like, there's a lot of people, involved in his life, and you just want to be respectful. He had passed away, not that long. I mean, it was like a year, year and a half before, you know what I'm saying? So I wanted to just be like courteous of that and make sure I was not stepping on anybody's toes. It really wasn't too pushy about, I never asked anybody to, everything was like, if you don't want to do it, I get it, but this is what it is, and if it's something you're down for, let me know. And most of them were like, yeah. I traveled to Pittsburgh multiple times. I went to LA a couple times. So I was kind of retracing the footsteps. Was in Brooklyn a lot. And, I'm from New York, so that wasn't like the craziest, adventure, you know what I'm saying? But I live in New Jersey now, so I would have to take time out to do that. And also I was a new parent at that time, which is the reason why the name of this podcast is so on the nose for me, because I got a dad bod in the middle of doing this. But yeah, it was, the reason why this project was so powerful for me, was I became a parent when I started this, so I was thinking about how a life begins. And that's sort of what you're doing when you make a biography, right? You're thinking about the things that, make a person. So I was looking at somebody that was just made, and I was just like, yeah, what would, you do when, you're this age, and, who would your friends be, and blah, blah, blah. It started getting me thinking about, invention and reinvention and just all that. So yeah. Now, as far as the second part of that, which was like dealing with like stands and all that, that was a really disappointing. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's really no way to dance around it. It was really like depressing for everybody. It was depressing first and foremost, for the fans, right? Because when they do stuff like that, they're kind of working against themselves. If I was a fan of John Lennon, I want to know everything about John Lennon, right? I don't want to not know about John Lennon and be like, you know what? You're trying to tell me something really amazing about him, but you didn't, do this the right way, blah, 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 and then most of that information about whatever I was doing was not accurate, and it didn't, it wasn't like it came from me. So, I have, well, this year would be my, no, 2 more years, 18 years, right? I've been doing this, right? I've been doing this 18 years. I mean, you don't get to do something 18 years by doing the wrong thing, so I just felt people were making kind of snap judgments on, me and my work, and that was really disappointing. And that's the reason why I kind of continue to support the book in the way that I have, doing events and talking to people like you guys, because I still feel the book has not gotten a fair shake, and I want to get people to give it the attention it deserves, right? I don't think anybody's really picked it up and felt like it wasn't something that it was falsely advertised by somebody else to be something it wasn't, and so that's how I feel about it. But the last thing I'll say, I mean, I can talk, about that shit forever if you want to keep going with it. But I do think that it was dangerous, you know what I'm saying, for, my family, right? Like I said, I have a young daughter in the house, all that, stuff with the, stands kind of coming for me and all that shit. This is coming up on about a year ago, so she was only 2, and we had like police outside of our house, you know what I'm saying? Like, this is a pretty serious situation, when you're amplifying negativity about somebody that people feel a really strong connection to, you really just need one fucking psycho to, come on your property and do something crazy. And you can't really control all these psychos, right? When you're putting that out on the, on the internet. And I remember, when I was dealing with the police, I go in the police station and the guy's like, well, what's going on? And I kind of tell him, he happened to be around the same age as I was. He was like, "You're doing a book on Mac Miller?" He was like, "That's amazing." This is a cop, by the way. He's like, "That's amazing. I love Mac Miller." And he was like, "Oh, I've been to his shows." Right. And we wind up talking about like all this. Actually, no joke. I'm so glad I'm talking about this because he listens to this podcast. Right. I remember being in the police station talking about this podcast with him.
That is crazy.
Yeah,
that is unbelievable. I would say is a better term.
Wow.
That you know what I'm saying?
Wow.
Like we're literally in there and we're talking about podcasts and he was talking about this podcast and I was like, that's nuts. So he probably will hear this and be like,
wow, that is crazy. Officer, we're sorry. Let's thank you, Paul, for going through that. I'm sure that was a very difficult time for you and your family. You don't deserve that. And let's take it a slightly different direction. Tell us, like, you wrote a fucking book. Like, are you proud of it? What are you proud of about it? What has been the good part about this process?
I mean, the good part of it has been just doing the thing. Like I'm kind of old enough to feel that like I just get enjoyment out of like the thing being out there, right? And I liked, I don't know, I just kind of like nerding out for 300 pages or whatever it was, for 110,000 words. There was a lot of desire on my behalf to quote unquote go long on something for a long time. And when you do stuff for publications, you're often at the mercy of the publication, right? In terms of, how you cover things and what you cover, and, they want you to ask specific things. But when you're a writer and you author something, it really is something that is very much what you want to do. Like you kind of take control of it and it's your vision, right? You're like the Martin Scorsese of that thing. Right. And that's kind of what I had in my head a lot while I was working, on it, was just like thinking of great creatives that I admire, and trying to do something that could be sort of judged as like a piece of art. Even though it was a biography and, and it was very much like based in fact and journalism and stuff like that, I wanted something that was like, I'm just into art, so I there was a couple of years of my life where I wasn't probably even doing shit really, and I was just like going to museums and stuff. And, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's like kind of what I'm, inspired by, like, painters and, people just doing things that last. So, but I haven't really had any, I mean, as far as like, perks and shit, there haven't been any. I unfortunately, because of like a lot of the stuff around this book and the way it was, unfairly treated. I didn't get any of the things you get when you like put a book out. It's like a big ego stroke for people, and to be like, oh, I didn't even announce this book, like everything for me was about just the thing itself. I didn't want to talk too much about it before it came out, because I grew up, like playing basketball and stuff, and I always didn't like when people talked a lot before they played the game. I always felt that was a sure recipe for disaster. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's somebody on the sidelines just won't shut the fuck up, and then they get on the court and they just get destroyed. I just wanted to be like, the person that doesn't say anything and just does like plays a good game. And people were like, God damn, that motherfucker really played the game. Like he can shoot, that type of thing. But yeah, I haven't really, had anything like, I my life hasn't changed at all. You know what I'm saying? Like in any sense, maybe it will, but yeah, I don't. It just feels like I didn't even do anything, to be honest with you.
That's super honest, and that's all we can ask for, and I appreciate it. Maybe a get out of jail free card in New Jersey.
Maybe. I mean, if it gave me like an opportunity to really do some things where I get to connect with people, like and talk about it, and that's been cool. And I think there's been good feedback, from a sizable contingent of his fans. Like even today, I was just on looking at the Reddit that he has. Like there's like, I think in the last 2 days there's like 5 different threads on this book. The book came out in January, right? So and people like just going back and forth about how good it is and all this stuff. And yeah, I feel like it's cool. I like that people thought it was, like I said, something else. Then they get it and they're like, oh wow, this is not really what I thought it was. So that's been gratifying. And some of his fans, email me and like, really complimentary. So that's cool too. Yeah. I mean, the main thing has been, if somebody picks it up, I always say didn't really write this for like, first week sales or even first year sales. I was just looking at like Herman Melville, right? Moby Dick sold like 500 copies while he was alive. I think, I think it was more than that, but he made like a total of $500 in his lifetime.
Right.
And yet, people are still reading it. I never read it, but I'm just saying.
It made me, when you're telling that story, it made me think about, do you remember Salman Rushdie?
Yes.
And how he kind of pretty much had to go into hiding after writing Satanic Verses because Islamic community was after him. So you're still alive, which is great to see. Next time you're with the cops, you don't know about us. You don't know about what goes on in this podcast. As we round home here, do you have another book in the works? Are you thinking about potentially profiling someone else or a different type of book? Like, do you have book 2 plans?
Not really. I have a couple of things that I've been thinking about doing, but I often feel like a lot of creative stuff's like kind of stumbling around in the dark and just kind of seeing if you can find a light switch, right? And that's kind of the thing is, I have to kind of stumble around, and there's a few things sort of brewing. But yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. I think there would some people in my corner right now would love if I could have like a really good idea, like strike when the iron's hot. I'm like,
yeah,
I don't know, man. Like I'm not really like that kind of person. I don't. I wish I was more like career focused. I'm just not. You know what I'm saying? Like life is just too interesting spend it thinking about what you're gonna do. Like, sometimes you just need a little bit of while to just bounce around and just feel things out. So yeah, I think my next thing may not be a book. Yeah, like there is an energy that's leading me in a direction right now, but unfortunately, it's not in the book space. Yeah.
Okay. I'm excited to see what happens, and it was nice to spend some time with you. And thank you very much again for your honesty and candor. It was a cool talk. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, thanks so much. I totally was not making that up about the cop. I wish I could remember his name. But that is 100% a real story.
If he reaches out on a DM or something, I'll connect everyone.
Because Nate is our cop liaison. I will not be talking to said law enforcement
officer. I didn't know I couldn't do that.
Awesome. Thanks, Pete. Appreciate it, man.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Take care.
Later.
All right, that was our conversation with Paul Cantor. Want to thank him for coming on. I always like a guest who is down to tell the stories.
Yeah.
Tell us that story. What that one time you went to Foxy Brown's house? Tell us that story.
Totally. That was a great story. I kind of forgot about that until you brought that back up. That was actually really interesting. Yeah. It's such a golden era of hip hop journalism when they would fly you places. My goodness. I'm only going to speak for myself here. I totally missed the boat on that part. I actually saw this tweet that was kind of going viral among the writer bros today. It's put your location in your actual location, not a joke, in your Twitter biography, because a lot of editors are assigning stories based on where you are because they're not flying anybody anywhere. And
anywhere.
That's interesting. That's a sign of the times.
There we go. Nate LeBlanc, live from Los Angeles. Dave, as a fellow writer, did that freak you out, that story about his family being threatened around the release of the Mac Miller book?
Certainly. I think when it gets into the realm of violence, get the fuck out of here. You're way crossing the line, unless somebody wrote a hit piece on Mac Miller, which certainly is not. Paul Cantor, who's written for the New York Times, is certainly going to do his research and approach it with a certain amount of respect. And when we talk to Paul, he's a fan of Mac. So it's that's what you want. You want a fan who is well-researched and well-experienced.
Absolutely. Know what's something that didn't come up, I don't think specifically in either book, but when you write for a huge publication like that, they fact check. That's what makes it the New York Times or the New Yorker or whatever other huge legacy publication. They have someone whose job it is to see if you lied. And there was that whole wave of Stephen Glass and those guys who were the fabulists. There was a whole generation of bad journalists who kind of shook the industry to its core. We're past that. It's too easy to find out if someone said something or not. Anyway, I just you could tell Paul was still upset.
He definitely
as he should be.
Should be.
He was affected. It's certainly affected. In this day and age of the internet, though, it's fuck, dude. If you're that pissed off, go check the facts yourself. Don't attack the writer's fucking family.
Totally.
Unbelievable. No, insane. And it kind of reminds me of I think hip hop in particular. And it's not limited to hip hop, but I think hip hop has always had a thing. Remember when the Source journalists were getting threatened when they would give bad reviews, right? Yeah. So it's hip hop's relation to criticism has been always physical. Has always been physical. Totally. I do, because when I read criticism and other things, I never think about, I wouldn't want to see Keith Murray in person. You know what I mean? It's that one.
Especially not form. If I was talking about a later record.
Yeah, right. The not beautifulest thing. So it's very interesting, hip hop's relation to with criticism and journalism. And I am happy that we are living in an age where legit serious books about subjects can be written. Shout out to Lance Scott Walker. Shout out to Paul Cantor for doing the work.
One more thing before we move on. Around the Doom thing, and again, this just got announced, and it's just the first tweets about it and stuff like that, but people seem to be thinking that, like, in order to legitimize this biography, some of the money that could potentially be made would need to go to his family. And that's not how books work. One, they don't make any money.
Right.
Yeah, that'd be a bad scheme.
It's like getting a sample cleared for, like, let's just use an example of a Doom record.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, right.
Like, did he pay the stylistics or whatever? Like, I don't need to impugn the concept of sampling. Yeah. You guys know how I feel about this. I just thought, one, thinking that there's going to be money in this is insane. Like, when was the last time you bought a book deal? Yeah. Now,
not about
times that by 7 billion people in the world, and that's how many people are buying books. And two, like that's something that's about someone would need to financially benefit them is like, I actually don't think people think that. I think they're twisting their logic in a knee-jerk reaction. That doesn't make sense.
It's the fear of profiteering is real. It's just the book is a weird place to start that conversation because there's like bootleg Doom shit like flying around the world at a really rapid rate, right?
Right. Charlie Brown in the Doom mask. You got to start there, right?
Yeah, exactly.
For George Schultz and for Doom.
Yeah, exactly. Totally. Like, who's getting paid there? So it's always interesting, but I think when we become protective and, to Dave's point, precious about our heroes, to me, we cheapen them because they were real ass people. They had complex lives. I know that in some ways we treat them godlike, but they were just people. And so stories about real people, I think should be encouraged, and we shouldn't like put barriers and people feeling afraid to do that type of work. They used
to have the term warts and all.
Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
You don't really hear that much anymore.
Totally.
No, warts are not allowed.
I wish there were 10 Doom books, because then the good ones will surface, it's like, what the fuck? At this juncture, everything is just like the one book right now. So I sort of get being careful with it. But again, if it's in good hands, and again, we work and exist in these circles. So we know who is working on this stuff. And we would be the first to chastise it if it was.
If it was somebody trash. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah. If it was somebody trash, then we would definitely invite them on the pod to talk about what trash. We do some confrontation. Yeah, exactly. I want to thank everybody for tapping into this writerly discussion this week. As you know, we are on Twitter, the 7th Circle of Hell at Dadbod Rap Pod. We are on IG, the 6th Circle of Hell at Dadbod Rap Pod. We are on Patreon, Heavenly Gates. Come on through.
Heavenly Gate, as in the cult, not the actual physical.
Hey, and my guy was in Waco. My dude was in Waco. I held on to that joke the entire time because I'm mature, but I wanted to make Bresh Davidian jokes. Check us out on Patreon, patreon.com/dadbodrappod. We have a robust conversation happening there. Nate just posted the latest episode of Fly Sporadic. I posted a new playlist today.
Yes.
So there are we're pushing towards 70 plus hours of content segments, music,
that's interesting,
all kinds of things. Not that anyone's counting, I am. Of stuff that's just behind the paywall, $5 a month or more, gets you into the pearly gates of hip hop wisdom. So fuck with us there. And other than that, you can check for us every Thursday. We drop new episodes. Stab by Rap Pod.
Thanks for watching that, and if you dug that, leave a thumbs up and say what up in the comments, and make sure to subscribe to Stony Island Audio for more.